Good morning, everyone. My old friends, clients, whoever else out there might get this. It's Chuck Rogers coming to you from my office. Our new name, Realty Consultants and Associates. Take note of that, please, and remember to refer people to us. Thank you. Wanted to talk to you today. I want to talk to you today about something that's in the Wall Street Journal again. I'm going to do this in three parts because there's a lot to this. It has to do, it's entitled 5 Years Later, Don't Mention the Feds. This article talks about how much the federal government and the laws and the rules and the structure basically created this whole subprime mess by law that was passed in 1992 under the Clinton administration. It basically required the government and the banks and everything else to lend to these subprime borrowers. I'm going to read a lot of this because a lot of it needs to be read. For me to try to ad-lib it might be. I'm going to try to keep it short. That's why I'm going to do this in 2 or 3 parts. It affects all of us that own a home or are part of this society trying to work and pay our bills and everything else. It starts off with the 5th anniversary of the Lehman Brothers collapse. The media have been full of analysis about what happened in those fateful days. We have plenty about Wall Street rapacity, but any discussion of the government's central role in the disaster is neatly avoided. So typical. At the time of Lehman's failure, half of the mortgages in the United States, 28 million loans, were subprime or otherwise risky and low quality. Of these, 74% are on the books of the government agencies, principally the government-sponsored enterprises known as GSEs, government-sponsored enterprises of Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. We've heard a lot about them and we bailed them out, but some of the details of why they got put in that position was because of the politics and the legal stuff. And of course the politics is partially about the banks and the political action committees and the Wall Street people putting pressure on the politicians by throwing a bunch of money in their pocket to get them to go along with what they wanted, which was more volume and more money. Unfortunately, the short-term benefits ended up in a long-term collapse. To go on their face, these numbers suggest that the government's housing policy had created the demand for these mortgages. But in recent days, nearly all articles have focused on the 26% of mortgages that were the responsibility of the private sector. You see how our government tries to shift everything to us, to the private sector, and get the politicians wanted off their back and on everybody else. It is as though if the vast majority of the subprime mortgages that the government bought didn't exist. That's typical. They pretend like they didn't do it. Perhaps you haven't noticed, but since the 2008 meltdown, the government housing specialist, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, we know it as HUD, has not been active in the debate over the housing policy. Why? They wanted to hide. They knew that it was very much their fault as what happened. They took their policies from 30% would be an acceptable level of subprime loans, and they took it up to 56% in the long run, which actually put everything upside down. So there was a time when HUD was not so modest. In 1992, Congress, under Clinton, and that's not to put just the blame on Clinton, he's not alone in this government, adopted an ironically named Federal Housing Enterprises Financial Safety and Soundness Act. Is that a joke? I mean, it's amazing the label they put on these things. Also known as the GSE Act, giving HUD the authority to administer the legislation Affordable Housing Goals. The law required Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. The law required Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, when they acquired mortgages from lenders, to meet a quota of loans to borrowers that were at or below the median income where they lived. Now, Fannie and Freddie, again, the government-sponsored entities, were required to buy these things, and they buy the loans once they're bundled together in what they call warehousing, and then they get moved on to Wall Street from there. And that replenishes the system with money, and the money basically comes from these government-sponsored entities back into the system, so now it grows and it grows and it grows to what's called fractional banking. Now, I'll go on and I'm going to stop here pretty quick. Eventually requiring a quota of 56%. That's how HUD raised the quota. And to those heady days, HUD was pleased with its work. They were going, look how many people own properties. I think it went up to something like 63% of our population. In 2000, for example, when HUD Secretary Andrew Cuomo was raising the quota to 50%, the agency actually sounded boastful about its role, describing the gains in home ownership that had been made to low and moderate income families. HUD. In other words, hey, vote for us, everybody. We're really helping all you out here, even though you're going to get stung in the long run. You're going to lose your house. You're going to lose the money you put into it. You're going to lose the money you paid to buy it. But don't worry, you love us for the moment, right? So anyhow, it goes on. I'll go further down the article, and I'm getting pretty close to the end. The goals for 2001-2000 will encourage the GSEs to further step up to support their affordable housing, in quotes. Credit scores and down payments were not relevant. Only income, which I think even that was lied about. They didn't require documentation. And minority status would satisfy the goals. And here it is. HUD was still at it in 2004, stating that millions of Americans with less than perfect credit or cannot meet some of the tougher underwriting requirements of the prime market rely on subprime lenders for access to the mortgage financing. If the GSE is much deeper into the subprime market, more borrowers will benefit from the advantages of greater stability and standardization of costs. Anyhow, that statement is all you need to know to understand why the 2008 meltdown happened. 74% of the subprime mortgages outstanding the U.S. financial system were on the books of the government agencies, particularly Fannie and Freddie. That's all for this segment of it. Stay tuned for part 2, probably a week from now. I hope you'll listen to all this because it's incredible what it's done to so many people in our country, and perhaps it's affected you in some way. Have a nice day. Remember to refer people to us if you would. Don't keep us a secret. We appreciate the business. Have a great day. Thank you. This is Chuck Rogers saying adios.